let's address our very first topic, and that's got to do with taxation. Like I mentioned, you may come under the IT radar if you have certain high spends, and especially if you've not been properly filing your income tax returns. So let's talk about this a little more. I have with me Mayur Shah, partner with EY India. Mayur, thank you for joining us today on ET Now. So to start with, if you could sum up which exactly are these transactions and how will the IT department be, keeping an eye, because we're a huge population, right? So how exactly will the income tax department keep an eye of how every Indian is spending money?
And very interestingly, this has been kind of implemented over a number of years. The whole point is that, for some of the transactions, before undertaking the transactions, the taxpayer needs to provide their PAN number to the other parties. By providing the other parties, they have put an obligation on the other party to report these transactions through various electronic systems, whereby this data gets uploaded and gets recorded in the respective PAN number. And basis which now the person or a taxpayer who has undertaken the transaction gets mapped to that PAN number, and this is how the system gets mapped. Now let's look at it. What are the transactions where PAN number is mandatory, as a result of which how the tracking system really works. So if you buy a motor car, or open a bank account, or when you are having a time deposit account, or you get debit or a credit card, or you are having a demat statement, or you undertake certain transactions above certain values, then those are in those situations PAN number is mandatorily to be provided to the other party. Now the other parties are required to report these transactions. So, certain transactions such as, say, buying or selling any immobile property where the value exceeds 30 lakhs or stamp duty value exceeds 30 lakhs, or any investment in mutual funds or shares or unlisted security which is about 10 lakhs will have to be reported by the other party who is undertaking that transaction. Or any company which is implementing, any listed company which is implementing buyback of shares. In that situation, if the consideration is more than 10 lakhs, and then such company needs to report all these transactions electronically to the tax office. Or any bonds which are being purchased either from bank or from RBI, and which is about 10 lakh rupees. And if any cash deposited or withdrawn about 10 lakh rupees are required to be reported by the banks or by the RBI. So these are the manners in which the transaction gets reported and gets accounted on a particular PAN number.
Okay. So I just want to understand, that means, Mr. Shah, let's say today if I, one of the transactions which, the department has said that they will keep an eye out on is hotels. So if I am making a payment of 20,000 rupees, firstly, two clarifications. Is this, a bulk payment? I mean, I'm sure if it's a bulk payment, of course, it's going to get reported. But I mean, what if I'm making payments staggered, right? Because you go to a hotel, maybe, I mean, of course, right now we're in the lockdown, so we've really not gone. But, in normal circumstances, we would go to a hotel 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, in a year. So I want to understand, when we say 20,000 rupees, are we talking about one payment? And also, can I expect then the hotel or whoever the payee is, whoever I'm paying, above that certain threshold amount, they will be the ones that will be reporting to the income tax department that, look, Mubina Kapasi with PAN number so-and-so has spent that amount?
Yeah, so you are absolutely right. Where the hotel or restaurant payment, which is made in excess of 50,000 rupees in cash, only such transactions are required to be reported. And not every transactions with hotel will have to be reported. So therefore, it is not that every transaction needs to be reported, but the transactions which are undertaken in cash, and cash means either cash or pay order or by bankers draft. In those situations, it needs to be reported, not otherwise. So therefore, every transactions with hotel or things need not be reported or need not be, tracked.
Okay, so just to clarify, if there are cash payments exceeding the thresholds that the government or that the IT department has put forward, those will be reported. But if I'm making, an electronic payment or, credit card payment or a check payment, those will not be reported to the department, because any which ways I'm making the payment from my bank account, which obviously has got KYC, etc. done. So the government, the department already knows, who's making this payment. Just to get that right?
Absolutely right. Because you opening a bank account, you already given PAN number. So that is getting anyway tracked. So therefore, no necessary to track it again.
Okay, all right. Now, there's also a report which says that all of your, high value transactions will be mapped to your Form 26AS. So just want to understand, from my part, there would be no compliance, or is there anywhere that I need to inform the IT department or any revenue department about certain transactions or certain spendings that I'm doing? And also, these transactions being reflected on my Form 26AS, it indicates that, what exactly does it indicate? Because 26AS essentially is a tax statement, right? How much tax have I paid? And the TDS being deducted on my behalf. So what's the correlation between the Form 26AS and my spending?
Yeah. So basically 26AS, all these high value transactions will be reflected, which would mean that income tax authority has received information that these transactions has been undertaken by you. Now, there is no said rules or provision under the law which says that you have to act on it. However, if any transactions which you have not undertaken, in that situation, you should try and report that to the tax authority that this transaction has not been undertaken by me as a precautionary measure. Let me give you an example that we submit PAN details for various reasons. And possibly some of them have used this PAN detail for undertaking certain transactions for them. And obviously it will get tracked in the person who has given the PAN number. And if this transaction has not been undertaken, if you do not state to that authority that this transaction has not been undertaken by me, then that could create a challenge for you. So it is advisable to verify the transactions and see that, whether you have undertaken or not. If you have not undertaken any such transaction, please intimate tax authority, please inform them. In fact, that is coming out even from the taxpayer charter as well. Be informed. So if something has been informed to you and if you have not undertaken that transaction, then you please report it to them.
All right. Okay. Mayur, would you advise that individuals, when they make these high value payments, right, for hotels, school fees, so on and so forth, would you advise that they should keep the bills with them and sort of ensure that they have better documentation of all their high value spends, whether they spent it via cash or an electronic medium?
Yes, advisable that it should be kept at least for a year, because tax authority may ask for such details. But certain payments would definitely be there with the person, like investment in shares, securities, or mutual funds, or undertaking any such transactions. You would always have some evidence with you. Education fee and all that, not necessarily one needs to keep it, but it is good to keep it at least for a year. Tax authority may not ask for it. So far in past, we have not seen anybody asking for such details. If you have appropriate income reflected in your return, then this information is never being called upon.
Okay. Okay. Well,
returns and ensuring that they're compliant,
then sort of filing their returns and ensuring that they're compliant with every aspect of the law, because it's clearly mentioned that if you've not filed your return, firstly, obviously there's going to be a huge penalty, etc., which if you could just reiterate for our viewers, but also the TDS as well, that will be deducted on all of your receipts and incomes will be higher.
Sorry, I could barely hear the question. Can you please repeat it?
My question, Mayur, is that the fact that all of these high value transactions now do come under the income tax department's radar. If you could just denote why this makes it all the more important that individuals ensure that every year they file their income tax return.
So the thing is that when high value transactions are reported and it is reflected along with your PAN, what income tax department in turn does is they try and see your income level, and does this financial transaction is supported by the income level or not. They will also compare with the asset reporting of assets in and outside India, and then they will try and see whether any discrepancy is there vis-a-vis what investment has been made or what transactions has been disclosed. If any such transactions or any such situation is not reflected well, then they will definitely issue notices and they will try and request for various informations and returns. And therefore, it is advisable to file the return, and so that this never gets inappropriately never gets reflected in your return, and therefore there are no notices which will be issued by the department. So it is advisable that we file the return if we have undertaken any high value transactions.
Mayur, I want to talk to you that if individuals do have this tendency of conducting these high value transactions like the ones which are flagged off with respect to electricity bills, hotels, school fees, so on and so forth, do you think that they have a higher probability of perhaps receiving a notice, or if there's anything in relation to that?
I don't think any notices will be issued just because they have spent. So let me just give you a little bit of background that a certain transaction which mandatorily requires filing of return of income, where any deposit of 1 CR in one or more current accounts, or any expenditure toward electricity in a year which is above 1 lakh or more, or any expenditure in foreign travel with 2 lakhs or more are mandatorily required to file the return. And in those situations, when you are filing return only on account of this, then you have to provide an explanation in the return of income that how and why you have undertaken that transaction. In that situation, you are anyway explaining while filing the return. The other transactions which you spoke about, that if I paid school fees or things like that, there is no requirement as such under the Indian Income Tax Act to report or to file the return only on account. And in that situation, if you have incurred those high value, or if you have undertaken any high value transactions, and if it is not supported by appropriate income or wealth, in that situation, tax authority may come and ask a person to explain how they have undertaken that transactions. And only in those situations, they will take it for audit. Just because high value transaction is undertaken, it will definitely receive a notice. I don't agree. I don't think that is possible, and I have not seen in past any such notices has been issued by the income tax authorities.
Okay, all right. Just one last question, before we move on to queries, and I want to talk to you about the transparent taxation platform, which was announced by the Prime Minister last week. So we knew faceless assessments is the new norm. We knew that the taxpayer charter as well. It was announced by the Finance Minister. However, faceless appeals, it requires higher documentation. It would require higher correspondence as well, because this is the next step, right? I mean, you've already got one order, but then you want to appeal that order. So I'm assuming it would require a more complex degree of communication between the department and the assessee. More tricky process?
Hello. Hello.
If you can hear me, Mayur, I wanted to talk to you about the faceless appeals process. This is at an appeal stage, so I reckon it would require more documentation, more correspondence as well. Do you think that could be a bit more tricky to?
I agree. It will be very tricky. So currently, I don't think they have announced any procedure or any system with respect to faceless appeal. And I think, we have to wait till the detail gets announced. But you are absolutely right. The issue which will be in appeal requires more in-depth discussion and knowledge. Especially when faceless appeals we are talking about, the way faceless assessments are being done, that it breaks the regional barriers. However, as far as appeals are concerned, our judiciary system is based on geographical background, and within that range, it has to work. I'll give you one example that Bombay High Court judgment will be applicable and will have to be followed within Bombay jurisdiction, and other jurisdiction can follow, but it is not mandatory for them to follow unless there is adverse judgment is not available in that jurisdiction. Now, in this situation, this becomes very, very tricky in terms of how do you explain the complex points or discussions which you have to undertake without having face-to-face discussion. B, when you are explaining in writing, there are several other questions may arise. And it is easy to clarify when you are having a discussion with a person so that, it allows that person to judicially decide the case rather than, deciding without having appropriate knowledge about that point. And therefore, to me, it appears that, one has to really see that how they are going to put this system in place. But it is very, very challenging in terms of having a faceless appeal to have a discussion, to debate about any technical points and drive towards the judicial conclusion. So yes, it is very, very tricky and, looks difficult to achieve this. But I think we have to wait until the things gets properly announced.
Mayur, on that note, we will let you go. Thank you so much for joining us today on The Money Show. Pleasure always having you with us. We will take a very short break right here on the show. Don't go anywhere.